Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Slasher Hour. I'm Lurch.
I'm Darkman.
Our special guest, Julie. Sit back and crack yourself a cold one. And enjoy. Honey, would you like a beer?
No, I've got my soda down here. Thank you.
So tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about witches and folklore. So, I'll let you guys go first.
Oh.
You go first.
Alright. So, my favorite movies, not all of them, I'm sure, but The Covenant, Hocus Pocus one, and I actually really did like the second one.
Haven't seen it.
I really can't wait for that.
Hocus
I
Pocus.
really can't wait.
Oh, yeah.
For the,
I know,
come
that
out.
comes out in
I'm really excited.
October.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see that one. Practical Magic, because hey, who doesn't need some margaritas in the kitchen?
Mm-hmm.
The Conjuring, the original Craft, and my personal favorite, I know it's not a movie, but series, is The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Yeah, I count that.
Because that was pretty awesome. But there's so many more.
How about the Sabrina Teenage Witch?
Well, of course, most of them. God love.
Darkman.
Okay. For movies, I got The Witch, 2015. Lords of Salem, 2012. Craft, 1996. Hocus Pocus, 93. Blair Witch, 99. And the TV show Salem. It was a TV show. It had 3 seasons.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. Well, my list is The Blair Witch Project, written and directed by Daniel Maverick and Nardo Sanchez, starring Heather Donahue, Michael Williams, Joshua Leonard. It was released July 14th, 1999, and at box office at $248.6 million. My next movie is The Witch. Its release date was October 18th, 2015. It was directed by Robert Eggers, starring Ellie Granier, and it had a budget of $4 million. I don't think it had a box office because it came out to Netflix, is what I think it happened. The Craft, released May 3rd, 1996, directed by Andrew Fleming, starring Clarissa Balk, Robin Tunney, Nev Campbell, Rachel True, Skeet Ulrich, Christina Taylor, and Becca Meyer. Box office at $55.6 million. And everyone has this one on the list, but Hocus Pocus, release date was July 16th, 1993, directed by Kenny Ortega, starring Bette Midler, Kathy Najimy, Sarah Jessica Parker, Army Katz, Vanessa Shaw, Thora Birch, Doug Jones, Sean Mary, and part 2 comes out October 20th, October of 22 this year. Box office at $45.4 million. And my last one is Halloween Town. Was released October 17th, 1998. It was directed by Dwayne Dunham, starring Debbie Reynolds, Judith Hogg, Kimberly J. Brown, and Joey Zimmerman. It didn't have a box office just because I think it was released in Disney Channel.
Yeah, my kids love that.
Yeah, I did too. And you guys know who Judith Hogg is, right? She played April O'Neil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And let's see here. Some honorable witch movies mentioned. Looking in my notes.
Surprised you didn't like Witches of Eastwick.
Oh, that was one of my other favorites.
Yeah.
The witch movies are the Wretched, Hansel, Gretel and Hansel, The Unholy, Fear Street, The Ritual, Hereditary, Old Ways, The Conjuring, Blair Witch 2016, The Witches of Eastwick, Warlock, Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters, The Coven, Pumpkinhead, Superstition, Black Sunday, Jack O. There's no lanterns, just Jack O. The Cleansing, Cry Banshee, Witch House, Paranormal Activity, which none of us had on our list, and I don't know why. Lords of Salem, The Pale Door, Season of the Witch, Snow White, 1997, the one with Sigourney Weaver, and Simon King of the Witches, and The Love Witch, and Dead Time Stories.
See, when I was looking this up, they had Maleficent on there too.
Yeah,
As a
that's, I
witch.
don't think that's really a witch movie.
Do you guys remember the movie Witches?
Witches,
I think so.
plural.
They had a new one that just came out.
Oh, the one with
Mhm.
Anne Hathaway.
Yeah, well, the old one.
That one's got that.
My favorite.
I can't remember who that is.
But favorite cartoon witch is from Bugs Bunny. That's Hazel.
Yeah.
Okay, a little bit of backstory of witches. In the village of Salem in February 1692, Betty Paris and Abigail Williams, her cousin, were sick and were beginning to have fits of rage, and they were said to have been pricked or bitten by an unseen force. This is what kicked off the Salem witch trials. Let's see here. Betty Paris, Angela Williams, Ann Putnam, and Elizabeth Hubbard. All four of these girls are basically, they were all big conspirators in the Salem witch hunts. It said here that Betty Paris went on to have 6 children and died at the age of 77. Abigail Williams disappeared after the trials. She was said to die on March 21st, 1760. Ann Putnam accused 62 people of witchcraft, and she died in 1776. Elizabeth Hubbard got married and moved away. She was a lead investigator during the witch trials. The first person they were ever to convict of the Salem witch trials was a girl named Sarah Good. She was born, looks like July 21st of 16... No, she wasn't. Sorry. She could have been born in 1653. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it says 1653, and then she died at the age of 39, 1692.
Yeah.
So, okay, that makes sense. She was hung for witchcraft, and she was hung with 4 other people. Now, during this time, a man named Nicholas Knowles, who was a witch hunter, was knighted by King George, walked around with a giant staff, and was said that he could wave down a witch with it. Every time a witch was hung during the trials, he'd take his knife and put a notch in it. He asked her to confess, and she would go to heaven. And her last words, which was really good, her last words, I am no more a witch than you are a wizard. And if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink. Every time. Her phone rings every time.
I have no idea who that was.
So, 25 years after Sarah Good died, Nicholas Knowles died from choking on his own blood. And it was said right before he died, he told his wife and his children that he kept seeing Sarah Good's ghost, like, stalk him up to the days that he died. Let's see here. The people that were all executed during the Salem witch trials, their names were Bridget Bishop, Sarah Good, Rebecca Nurse, Elizabeth Hogue, Susanna Martin, Sarah Wilders, George Burroughs, George Jacobs Sr., Martha Carrier, John Proctor, John Willard, Martha Corey, Mary E. Esty, Mary Parker, Alice Parker, William Reed, Margaret Scott, Samuel Wordswell, and Gary Corey. Now, one of the people that stood out against the Salem witch trials, her name was Martha Corey. Martha Corey was one of the people that stood up against the Salem witch trials, and she said that this is, unorthodox. This is crazy. It started off something so small, but it just spun out to be just pure insanity. So she stood up against the church, killing people. And she was tried and convicted, and one of the people that tried her stood against her during her trial was George Curry. And as she was hung, a couple months later, George Curry was the only person that was killed during the Salem witch trials that wasn't hung. He was actually pressed to death. They put him on a board, and then they put another board on top of him, and they stuck rocks on top of him until he was crushed. And his last words were "more weight," which was pretty crazy. Some of the people that died in the prison in 1692, you have Anne Foster, Marcy Good, Sarah Osborne, and Roger Toothard. These 3 of these people died from malnourishment. Roger was actually beaten to death. Mary Black, who was the only person, Mary Black was one of the only people to actually be released before her trial ever began. Pardons were Abigail Farkers, Doris Haar, Elizabeth Proctor, Sarah Deese, arrested for witchcraft on May 23rd in 1692 and pardoned by the governor in May 1693 along with 50 others. It was said that the governor stood by and let this all happen until his wife was convicted or accused of witchcraft. So then he stopped it.
Who was the governor?
Oh God, I don't remember his name. That was one of the things I didn't remember. Okay, and so some of the judges during the Salem witch trials were John Hawthorne, who lived from 1641 and died in 1717. William Stratton, Samuel Sewald, Nathan Stonewell, Bartholomew Jenner, Thomas Danford, Withorpe. Sorry, his name is Waite Withorpe. John R. Richards, George Carwin. And during the Salem witch trials, during the last months of the Salem witch trials, before the very last hanging happened, Waite Withorpe and John Richards. John actually married Waite's brother, or Waite's sister, so Anne Withorpe. So John Richards and Anne Withorpe got married, and he officiated that. Now, John Hawthorne, who lived from 1641 to 1717, actually was one of the main judges there. And John Hawthorne served on the committee to find a replacement for the ministry George Burroughs in 1686. He later sentenced Burroughs to death in 1692 in the Salem witch trials. Hawthorne believed that the devil could use the witches to undermine the purpose of the church and do harm to people. So, and not only were people being slaughtered, it would also kill animals because they thought that dogs were like part of the devil and shit like that. So number one thing was
familiars, is what they called.
yeah,
They
or
were
hellhounds.
whispering in the ears of these women to convince them to do the devil's bidding.
Right. One of the things is mass confessions. People would be beaten to death, or beaten until they confessed. Smallpox was another sign of witches. They have this thing called a swimming test, where they tie your hand and your foot together on a piece of rope and throw you in the water. And if you sank, you were a Christian, but if you floated, you were a witch, which makes no sense. They'd have the touch test.
That reminds me of the Monty Python and Holy Grail.
No.
If she floats, she's a duck. No, she's a witch. Burn her.
They have this thing called the touch test. So when Abigail and all the girls that were basically just trying to look for pity would start shaking, if the accused person would come up and touch them, then they were a witch. They had another thing called the Witchcraft Axe. Dogs were executed. Torture. What else? They had door-to-door witch hunters. What was his name? Nicholas Knowles and the Elizabeth Hubbard actually started the door-to-door witch hunters. They looked for something called the Devil's Mark, which could either be a birthmark or a lesion.
Yeah, they would strip people
Yeah.
naked, and they would find any marks, freckles, birthmarks, any kind of burn mark. And back then, people weren't using regular stoves; they were always burning themselves.
Right, it was the Devil's Mark.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Well, sometimes they wouldn't kill people. Sometimes they would take your land. They would remove your land, strip you of your title, and basically that's like killing a family, because back then you'd only had your land. Mass hysteria. You got, and I found this really interesting, that nobody was burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials. That was a European thing. So, like mostly in England. Thanks, John. It's all John's fault.
So many more.
That's almost like American Horror Story, the Coven.
Yeah.
Where they do burning and all that.
And there is much more on the Salem witch trials. Much more. I just kind of.
Trials, but I mean the crucifying for being a witch.
You know, you were really at the town's mercy if you weren't part of the upper class. Well, even then, like the upper class, they were considered. They could be witches. John Proctor was a very wealthy person in the town, and he was actually accused and hung for being a witch. You know, it was if these 4 girls didn't like you, and they accused people, you got to go to the gallows. And it turns out that Betty Paris and Abigail Williams, her dad was a minister, and he was really fire and brimstone kind of a minister. And, you know, he make these giant sermons about how the devil was in town and how the land is being out. And actually his servant was a Native American, and she whispered, and it was said that she confessed that she actually bewitched Betty and Abigail. And that's how this whole thing started. And then they'd say that's what all it was about. You know, Ann Putnam and Elizabeth Hubbard, they all got in on it, and they were all, you know, the 4 girls like, oh, he's a witch, he's hurting me. You know, when somebody would come in there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many people lost their lives during those times.
It was
Not
just
to the
it was just
Salem witch trials,
insane.
but many more. Just for doing simple things like practicing herbal medicine or living in the woods by yourself after your husband died, or having a miscarriage, or
It
anything.
can be considered witchcraft, yeah. It's
were
the
just-
pile of insanity that
it
just
was-
blows my
yeah.
mind.
it was just fingers being pointed and people being killed and accused, and it was awful.
It was not just killed, but murdered
Yeah.
for no reason. I read eventually that everybody that was killed during the 1692 witch trials were all pardoned. But a lot of these people weren't found. A lot of these people were not found. They can't find the original hanging site. They've been looking for that. They can't find where the graves have been dug. They would dig people in shallow graves with their toes and their chins still sticking out so people could urinate on them and kick them while they walked by. And then I think there is a lot more about this and about the things that went on during that time period that has been burnt and lost
It was
on purpose.
Forever
Well,
and ever and ever.
The TV series Salem. Well, they say a lot of them were put in a swamp, buried in a swamp. So
Right. Well, how many people are out there? You know, this is like one of the biggest government conspiracy cover-ups ever.
It wasn't necessarily government.
Well, yeah, the government of Salem covered it up. You know, when the church finally stepped in, when King George and everybody finally stepped in and they decided that this wasn't okay, when they decided that it wasn't okay, they covered up a lot of this stuff. A lot of books, a lot of literature, a lot of documentation were all burned because of this.
Why are you doing something?
Evelyn,
What are you doing?
she wants to be on TV. Hi, Snuggles.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi. What's your favorite witch movie?
What is this?
Oh, headphones.
What's your favorite witch movie?
Did you get that out of Colton's bag?
Bubbles.
The Witch and the Freaks Club.
The Witch and the Freaks Club. Don't you like Hocus Pocus?
No.
You don't like Hocus Pocus? You
Yes,
watch
you
it all the
did.
time.
I like Hocus Pocus.
You slept with that movie case underneath your pillow for months. Those are not yours. I
No.
have that first
Why don't you
time.
go upstairs?
Whose are those?
Those are Pearson something.
Okay.
Bravo.
Well, then
Pearson
you-
stole these.
No, he didn't.
No, he traded something.
Okay, go on.
Okay,
Go upstairs.
Take those back to Pearson, please.
We're doing something. Go on.
Yeah.
Be up there shortly.
Goodbye.
We have to hide over here.
Okay.
I told him I was gonna
Yeah.
put these in my
Anyway.
backpack.
Don't put them in your backpack.
So,
Give them back to your brother.
What is your
He's gonna freak out.
What are your favorite witch movie?
favorite of all time.
Yeah.
Oh,
They're not
gotta be
a
The
toy.
Craft.
No.
The Craft is really good. I never saw the remake.
give me
You
a
gotta buy
We own it. We
Yeah,
just
I
don't
know we
watch
own it, but it's not fair that we have it. It's stupid.
But if you get a chance, watch Salem, the TV series.
I've heard of it, but I don't think
It's-
I've ever seen it.
It's really good.
There was another one I was looking at. It was in here. The Unholy. I didn't know that's got Negan in it, and I never saw that. Apparently, it's about a witch, It looked a little CGI-y to my taste, so I wasn't sure if I'd like it. So, what about you?
My all-time favorite?
Yeah. Don't say Witches of Eastwick. That was so
No,
weird.
actually, my all-time favorite witches movie. I love Hocus Pocus. But Practical Magic would have to be my favorite.
Wow.
They call them margaritas in the delicious.
It's true. My favorite has to be the Blair Witch Project. I know a lot of people don't like that movie, and it's like this most underrated horror film of its time. I mean, that movie is psychologically scary. I watched the backstory to that, and they would put their scripts in film canisters and not tell the rest of the cast what they were doing. So that guy Josh that disappeared, Josh that disappears in the middle of the movie. I say Josh, I'm like, one of them disappears. They put his name in a film canister and told him that you're gonna leave. And he thought, all right, sweet, I'm going to Denny's, because they'd stuck these kids out in the middle of the woods for weeks, for days and days and days, and just mess with them. Run around, snap sticks, and when they want all this stuff that you're like, where they're like filming in the distance, like what's going on? That's the director and the producer running around banging sticks on all edges of the woods. And if you go to Burkittsville, Maryland, and you go into the woods where they filmed it, there's still people, the hanging branch people there. So I love.
I don't know if you're going out in the middle of the woods, knowing that there is a folklore about this Blair Witch.
Well, that's what they were doing.
Right, but who's stupid enough to do that? And
They were doing a documentary
believes
for
they're
their
gonna come
for their-
out alive.
They were doing a documentary.
I've seen way too many gosh darn movies for horror movies
I've-
to know that going out in the middle of the woods and
They probably just thought, and they
It's
thought it was somebody
stupid.
messing with them, and then they just kept walking in circles. I love that movie so much. We wrote a
any
song about
traditional horror movie, you know better than that.
it. That's Julie's beer. Oh, it fell on the ground.
It's a good thing I'm not drinking beer. Huh?
Hey.
Huh?
Well, I got nothing else to add to you.
Nope.
Well, I think the Slasher Club spoke. So next Slasher Hour, we're going to be doing 80s slashers. So you guys spoke. You voted for it. So that's what we're going to do. So until next time, I'm Lurch.
I'm Darkman.
And that's Julie. And you have been slashed. Cheers. I gotta get up.
Come on, Grandpa.
Did you record this time?
Yeah. So too.